right.
What's tonight's number, Rich?
All right, Richard Fowler and America, 6.3 million. Recent report. So one of the things we want to talk about here on the show, the crazy thing about the Trump administration is there's so many moving parts at any given time.
It's like helter-skelter.
It's insane. So remember like 2 weeks ago when there was this Republican healthcare bill and it passed and everyone was freaking out, and now everyone is freaking out about something completely different? Well, that's still a thing. So that didn't go away. We're gonna have to keep an eye on that as well. The news by the number is 6.3 million. That is the number of people with pre-existing conditions who could face higher premiums if the House's Obamacare replacement comes into law. Now, Richard, one of the things that people loved about the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, the previous law which Republicans have been attempting to repeal for the last handful of years. They tried to do it over 70 times symbolically. Now that they have their chance, they've got this terrible bill that they got through the House. It's the American Health Space Care Act. And one of the things that Americans loved about Obamacare, say what you want about the other pieces of it, was the fact that people with pre-existing conditions could not be discriminated against. Now, what Republicans have done has really done a bait and switch, where they're saying that people with pre-existing conditions are still going to, be safe, but we're going to handle it differently. And they're creating these pools and funding for these people. But ultimately, what you're seeing is, as these projections are coming out and reports coming out, that millions of Americans are going to be hurt as a result. One number that they like to throw out is, listen, people with pre-existing conditions aren't going to be affected as long as they keep health care. This only comes into play after 63 days. Now, let's remember two things. Often people with pre-existing conditions are very sick, and the logistics of navigating the already terrible healthcare system becomes much harder when you're dealing with something like cancer, for instance. Second point, the total gridlock of the American healthcare system, even if you're not sick, could mean that even if you initiate the process right after you lose coverage, it could take you over 2 months to get your next healthcare plan, leaving you in a situation where your premiums raise. So, Richard, take us in. What do you think?
And that's only part of it, right? Because I think the other part you have to this bill is these numbers also don't take into account that states can waive themselves out of the community. It's called community standards, and that basically says that that insurance companies have to charge a sick person the same they charge a healthy person.
Right. And
so if states like, for example, the state of Texas, which will likely waive out of this as they do for everything else, when they waive out of it, then we're never really going to know. There's going to be more individuals uninsured.
Right.
And the other myth I want to correct on this healthcare thing, because it is a very expansive issue. So people are, and Donald Trump is right, that yes, Obamacare is collapsing currently. But the reason why Obamacare is collapsing is pretty simple. Insurance companies, Aetna, Humana, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Kaiser Permanente, and I know I'm missing at least 4, right? All of these healthcare companies, they have fiduciary responsibilities to their stock shareholders.
Shareholders, yep.
Right?
They are businesses.
They're businesses. And what they're currently seeing is, okay, what their actuaries and all the people who study this stuff and all the analysts, yep. Right? And I have some friends who are analysts who literally all they cover is risk. Swiss banks, I have Swiss banker friends, they're pretty cool. And we were having a conversation about this, and like, yeah, so when you think about all the risks, the health insurance company is saying, well, it makes more sense for us to get out of the exchange,
sure,
because the exchange is going to collapse.
Right.
Right?
There's market uncertainty right now.
There's market uncertainty because we know that this president wants to get rid of the exchange. Right? So why would we stay in something that we know is going to disappear next month and risk our profits and our gains to this type of uncertainty? So we're going to pull out. So what the president created when he started talking about how he's going to repeal Obamacare, he's going to dig it up from the roots, is he created uncertainty in the market. And people fail to realize that. And this is what makes this president so problematic, is that every time he tweets, people in the world of business, actuaries, all these people that are like, okay, they use that information coming from the White House to determine risk.
Sure, and I'm surprised that we haven't seen much stock market volatility since he's entered office. I mean, a lot of people were predicting that, oh, if Donald Trump's elected, the market's going to tank. And strangely enough, outside of the healthcare industry,
It's done pretty well.
I mean, because, you know, so you have the volatility of Donald Trump for sure. But then on the other side of the coin, Donald Trump is interested in deregulating basically everything, which is obviously good for the stock market.
Absolutely, and I think here's the thing, though. I think that it's going to come to roost for the stock market and investors when he says, you know, tax reform is moving steadily, and they're like, ooh, where's the tax reform? Same goes for healthcare. Healthcare is moving fast. We're going to get it done. The Senate hasn't taken it up, and if anybody knows anything about Mitch McConnell, who is pretty much part of the concrete here in Washington, when if he has the votes, Mitch will be like, I got the votes. We're moving. Case in point, Neil Gorsuch. He's like, oh, we got our votes.
We got the votes.
We're moving.
Pull the trigger.
Pull the trigger. We're moving.
No one think. Just do it.
But if you see how slow, I mean, you don't even hear Senate Republicans talk about healthcare. They're like,
no. They're like, this is a mess.
This is dead on arrival. The House bill is dead on arrival in the Senate, to the point where we saw the president tweet this week. He said they need to change the Senate rules so my bill can get through. But
what are the Senate rules going to look like by the time Donald Trump?
Here's the thing.
There's not going to be any rules.
This bill,
already gone
the House bill has to pass. Some sort of House bill has to pass the Senate by September 1st.
Right.
Or they have to go back to the starting. They have to go back to the starting gates, because you can only reconcile the current budget, and the current budget date ends September 31st.
Right.
So
what do you think? Do you think they're gonna take it to the buzzer?
I think the senators are here's the thing. I don't think the Senate can afford to go out on an August recess without anything done. They're going to get hosed when they get home, right? And because Obamacare is... the other thing they could do is they could just slowly wait until Obamacare gets to the point of no return and let it collapse.
Looks like that's what they're trying to do now.
Let's wait the clock out. Let's let this thing collapse all the way.
I mean, I don't think that helps them at home.
No, I don't think it helps at home either, because when people start losing health care, they're not going to blame Obama anymore, because they're going to be like, wait a minute, y'all are for re-election. Why don't you fix it?
Right.
And we're already seeing what's happening at these town halls, and we already know approval ratings. Recent Gallup polls said only 8% of Americans approve of the Affordable Health Space Care Act, or the Accessible Health Care, whatever the hell the thing's called.
Americans Health Space Care Act.
Right?
Right.
And we also do, so the president, in my opinion, this president has major problems getting his agenda through. And you don't have to, I don't care how Republicans spin this. He promised that he would get $1 trillion infrastructure bill done. No, we haven't even started on that.
That's not even come up.
Hasn't even come up. He's promised to get this tax reform thing done.
Yep.
That hasn't happened. We got this Affordable Health, American Health Space Care Act out of the House, not out of the Senate.
Yeah.
And that's the agenda.
Basically, all he's got going for him, which really had nothing to do with him, was nominating a Supreme Court
justice.
Yeah,
and he got the, we'll talk about the Paris Accord later, which he pulled out of. And he even lied. I mean, he lied, though. Remember, he was the same candidate that said, and we'll talk about this later in the show as well, that, we're going to move the embassy back to Jerusalem. Not anymore. The embassy's staying in Tel Aviv. So once again, we could point out that he calls it lying Ted. How about lying Trump?
Lying Trump. There you have it, folks.